Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at, and welcome to today's webinar on the topic of supporting mental health for leaders. It's such a good topic to be having in January, right after the pandemic. And I'm really excited that we have Debbie Permain with us today. So my name is Victoria Granger, and I am with Wellness Works Canada, which is your nonprofit workplace health and performance association. So we support workplace health practitioners and employers in building healthy, high-performing work cultures. And we provide evidence-informed tools and resources, support, certifications that are really focused on bridging the gap between workplace health and employee well-being culture and workplace performance. We're actually the only association in Canada that supports and advocates for the workplace health practitioners that are in this industry. And so obviously as an association, we have memberships that are pretty cost effective, that support practitioners and employers in building healthy, high performing work cultures. And this month, it's Bill Let's Talk Day is coming up. So mental health is a big focus, right, for a lot of us. So I did just want to mention that we are offering our mental health first aid kits, which are just like a regular first aid kit, but they're for your mental health. So instead of grabbing a Band-Aid, you go ahead and grab a motivational tip or some essential oils or some mindfulness coloring or a fidget toy, those kinds of things. So we're offering them for 15% off. So you can use the code Let's Talk to get those if you'd like. And so anyways, what we do and what we offer is all in the aim of working towards our vision, which is a healthier, higher performing Canadian population and economy, one organization at a time, together. All right, so let's go into just the housekeeping here. So this webinar will be about an hour in length, and we welcome questions and we welcome questions and chat throughout. It will be interactive, and because we're talking about mental health, sometimes the topic is a little bit sensitive. So feel free, if you don't want to share your comment or your question to all attendees, when you go to the chat function, just click the down arrow and you can click on sending a message just to panelists versus to all attendees. Or you can actually even change your name, which is a new feature that I just learned about recently. So what you do is you just click on the participants button and then you find your name and you click the more button and you can click rename, and then you can chat all you want and be incognito. All right, so I'm excited again here. So why don't we bring, and so please feel free again to chat throughout the session. We're excited to keep it interactive and have questions and comments throughout. So I'm excited to have Debbie Permain with us today. So she is such an expert in this area and in this topic. She's been working in the industry for over 25 years now and working with CEOs and leadership teams of over 250 companies. She has a degree in social work, worked with at-risk youth. She's worked with in a lot of different projects and really kind of big name companies like Accenture, and she's worked with Global Knowledge for over 15 years. She's worked with Mona Chappelle for over 8 years, been involved with the Bell Let's Talk Day, and it just has a wealth of knowledge, won awards for her instruction and for the things that she has to offer. And so I'm really thrilled to bring her today to talk about this really important and timely topic around mental health and leaders. So welcome, Debbie. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I just want to take a moment and say to you, Victoria, I'm really grateful for the work that you're doing and the work that Wellness Works Canada is doing. I'm so inspired and really just grateful to have you and have this happening in Canada. And it's about time. As you mentioned, I've been in HR 25 years. I've been dreaming of something like this for probably the last 15 years. So really, like I said, just thankful for the opportunity to partner with you today and have this really important conversation. And as we were even just chatting before we got started today, I think it's interesting. It's really learning how to intersect, what we know from psychology, even psychiatry around the topic of mental health with how does that really then work in companies from an HR perspective. And so in this very short time that we have together today, I will hope to give a little bit of insight into that. And, we do full day training sessions on this topic, half day training sessions on this topic. So please, for all of you who have joined us, know that this is a very high level. We are hitting the ground running, and we're going to touch on a lot of things at a very high level. I want to encourage you to further training on this area, in this area, and to do a deeper dive. And I really want to encourage you to get the leaders, the employees in your workplaces some training around this topic. So let's get started. And as I said, just today, overview of what you can experience in a longer session, half day or full day. All right, so what are we going to be covering today? So our main purpose is that you leave here with increased understanding around mental health and well-being. We also hope to spend a little bit of time talking about how each one of us can help to decrease the stigma that still exists around mental health, especially in the workplace. And the leaders in workplaces and HR have a huge role to play in that. So we're going to be talking about that today. And also just some supportive steps that leaders can take. And my hope with every webinar is that at the end of our time together, you leave here with some concrete action steps that you will commit to implementing, making some SMART goals, scheduling them in, and being accountable to be part of the change around people's mental health and their experience in workplaces. So that's really our purpose of today. And as you can see from what I said, we've got a lot of important touch points. We're going to look at some stats. We're going to look at some models. We're going to be talking about stigma, protective factors, some tips around how you can support people at work. And lastly, just a really good reminder of just the amount of supports that are available for people. And so we're going to take a look at that today. I love what Victoria said, encourage questions, encourage comments, and feel free to send them privately as well. And I see already lots of action happening in the chat, which is great. The more you engage, the more interesting today will be for you. So poll number 1, here we go. How many Canadians do you think are off work every week because of mental health issues? So take a quick moment. Put your vote in there. Is it 300,000, 500,000 or more, or less than 300,000? Let's see. How many people are off work, either absent or short-term, long-term disability? Okay, let's see what we have. Let's see the answer. Victoria, throw up our answer. What did people think? All right, great. So you're already doing a great job, 500,000 or more. So I just want you to digest that for a moment. This is an issue that, as Victoria said, I've been working with Morneau Chappelle, delivering training for leaders and employees in workplaces for the past 8 years on this topic. Last year, prior to the pandemic, I'm going to tell you that mental health, resiliency, stress management were the top 3 training topics that I was being requested to deliver. That is very different than what I was doing from a leadership development perspective 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. The World Health Organization said that depression is the leading cause of long-term disability for men worldwide. This was prior to the COVID pandemic happening. So I think you can only imagine the impacts that the last 10 months has had, not just on our society and our economy, but on people's mental health and well-being. Take a look at some pre-COVID stats from the Canadian Mental Health Association. So roughly 7 million Canadians impacted. By age 40, 50% of the population's mental health, they would experience some kind of mental health issue in their lifetime. Suicide 4 times higher for men. So we're going to take a look at that today. That has a lot to do with stigma. And it was the leading cause of long-term disability for Canadians. It was estimated that it was costing our economy $51 billion a year. So these were pre-COVID stats. And in the last 10 months, we've had companies like Qualtrics and Gallup and even LHH, who I work for, and Forbes magazine printing all kinds of research that's been done. What do we see here? 68% of people are saying they have Zoom fatigue. 92% of employees who were surveyed in November said they were burnt out. 92%. Mental health is the lowest it's been since 2001. 52% of people feeling down and lower self-esteem, and a 42% of people saying their mental health has significantly declined since COVID. So again, I need you to just digest those numbers, not just from a human standpoint, but also the impact that that is having on your team, on their productivity, on their work quality, on their motivation, on their engagement, the impact that that is currently having on your business. And if you don't, after today, take this seriously and start putting concrete action steps towards this issue, I'm concerned, gravely concerned, about the future success of businesses. So this is why I'm passionate about getting this message out there, not just to the HR community. I do talks for HR folks all the time on this issue. How do we create wellness strategies? How do we operationalize mental health and well-being in the workplace? But we also need to be getting information out to the leaders. Leaders have the largest impact on how employees feel day to day in their jobs. And also, we need to be getting this training in the hands of our employees who are being impacted and affected. One of the key messages that I say to leaders is it's not your job to manage someone's mental health and well-being, but it is your job to role model health and wellness, to coach for it, to support and encourage it, and to provide people with tools and resources and access to support to help them be healthy. So training is a huge part of that. We can't just be giving leaders training on mental health. We need to be giving employees training on mental health so that they can take ownership over their own well-being and take action steps to help themselves be healthier. Now, here's my first question for all of you, because now that we've taken a look at the stats, at the current situation, and how that's affecting and impacting business, what are mental health risk factors? So I also do one-on-one coaching for people around mental health. And I'm going to tell you, over the last 10 years, I have lost track of the amount of people who actually believe that mental health is only caused by a person's genetics. And you can imagine, if we're taking a solution-focused or a problem-solving approach, if you believe mental health is caused only by genetics and things like brain chemicals and serotonin, then your only solution will be seeing a psychiatrist or a doctor to get medication. And this is why so many people continue to suffer from mental health and not actually get well, because genetics and things like brain chemistry is only one of the contributing factors. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you know? What do you think? What have you experienced? Or what do you believe to be contributing factors to people's mental health and well-being? What are other contributing factors? So you can just jot one idea into the chat. I mentioned genetics and brain chemistry. Yes, relationships, unhealthy, toxic relationships, stress. Thank you. Trauma, absolutely. Isolation, nutrition. Great. Family, culture. Yes. Finances. Sleep. Great. What else? Physical health. Thank you, Pamela. The news. I mean, this is one of the things I've got to tell you from a mental health protective stance. When COVID hit, I literally stopped watching the news. And with my husband said, I'm on a need to know basis. I do not need to be numerous times a day or even daily subjecting my mind to all the fear and the negativity and the worry around what's going on. Thank you. Stigma, great. You've said a whole bunch of things. Social media, technology, addiction. We are now seeing from neuroscience research that technology addiction is having a massive impact on people's mental health and well-being. Yes, relationship stress, the connection, that's the technology, 24/7. Absolutely. Injuries, medical conditions, the weather. I live in Vancouver. So I got to tell you that in the winter months here, I do things like massively increase my vitamin D. I have a light box that I turn on every morning while I drink my coffee. I have to get outside and exercise as much as possible. And seasonal affective disorder is real. I didn't even know this thing existed because I grew up in Ontario where it was bright and sunny all winter. And the first year I moved out here around November, I thought, what is wrong with me? I started to feel like a grizzly bear. I wanted to sleep. I was tired all the time, craving carbohydrates. I started crying. The next thing you know, I went to see my doctor to say, what is happening? So there are many things that impact our mental health and well-being. Number one, when I'm working with people, coaching them and in training, is I just want to encourage you right now to pause for a moment, take a look at the list and check off the risk factors that are relevant to you. So again, I didn't have everything up here. You guys said some great things in the chat, like isolation. I said stress in general, but you can say all kinds of things related to stress, whether that's workload, whether that's demands in the home, whether that's finances. So really to take stock of the risk factors that you have. And the reason why we need to do this is because if we're taking a solution focused approach, which is what we want to do, right? Coaching is about solving problems. Then we need to make sure the solutions that we're brainstorming actually are solutions that are going to deal with our risk factors. So I was speaking recently to a client who, believed that mental health is genetics and brain chemistry. And this client, over the course of 5 years, has tried 6 different medications from her psychiatrist without getting any relief. And when she and I met and we did this exercise on risk factors, the tears started flowing because she all of a sudden had an aha moment of, she hasn't had counseling for some trauma that's happened to her in her lifetime. And she is addicted to social media and technology. And that is massively impacting her sleep quality. And also, she has no strong support system in place. So as she became empowered and started making choices to resolve those issues for herself, she started to see her level of mental health and well-being increase. So lots of important things to look at when we look at risk factors. And then another great tool to help people understand their mental health and well-being is this mental health continuum model. And so what this model shows is that mental health is a journey and a process. Now, it doesn't always flow nicely in this direction. Okay. And so, what I want to say is when you experience trauma, you can literally go from being healthy one moment to being in a mental health crisis the next minute. And I've personally experienced that. And I've laid witness to this many times in the lives of my clients over the years and in the lives of employees. So again, mental health doesn't always follow this continuum of going from healthy to reactive to injured to mentally ill. But when it comes to things, for example, like stress or stress in the workplace, even things like the burnout continuum, what you can see is people can go from being in a healthy state, mentally, physically, emotionally, and over time end up in a place of being burnt out or experiencing some kind of mental health diagnosis. And so the key in any teaching and training is to help people become self-aware of where they are currently on this continuum. The reason why we always start with self-awareness is because you cannot manage what you're not aware of first. So, always starting first from a place of self awareness. The other key takeaway from this model is that what is healthy for each person is different. So, if you're extroverted or introverted, if you've been raised in North America versus an Asian country or a South African country, right? What looks healthy for you will be different than what healthy looks like for someone else. So, what I'd like to do is just ask you to give me some input here. When you hear the word healthy and you're thinking about yourself, if you were to self assess, self reflect, self evaluate that you're in a mentally healthy place, what does that look like and feel like to you? So it says here your mental health is good, you're normally functioning. Tell me what that would look like and feel like for you, being healthy. How would you know to assess that? So you'd be feeling in balance. Great. You'd be feeling a sense of calm, present. Great. Yeah, well rested. So even just waking up in the morning and not feeling exhausted and wanting to roll over and not get out of bed, feeling capable, feeling optimistic, feeling motivated. Great. So you would notice things like you would be sleeping well, you'd be eating in a reasonable amount, right? You'd be engaging at a certain level, whether that's with people or with exercise or with hobbies. So some level of healthy engagement for you, having energy. Great. You've said a lot of good things here. Yep, being control of your emotions better. So just feeling more balanced overall. Okay, great. So then again, just checking in with yourself. And one of the habits I want to suggest that you take away from today is regularly setting aside time for yourself weekly, just to check in. How are you doing this week? And with coaching, I love to ask my clients what are called scaling questions. So on a scale of 1 to 10, right? 1 being barely hanging on, cannot function, and feeling awful, right? 10 being super motivated, positive, engaged, energetic, hopeful. Where would you put yourself on that scale if you had to give a number today? So thinking back to what healthy looks like, what number would you give yourself today? We do this as a regular habit and practice in our family. So Sunday nights, sitting around the dinner table, once we're done eating dinner, we do a check-in. How is everyone doing? What is your number? Where are you at today? How was your week? I want to encourage you to even start getting your employees to be doing this weekly. And again, this is a great scaling question that leaders can ask employees when they're doing one-on-one coaching sessions. But I really also want to get you to encourage people to be reflecting on this for themselves. So again, self-reflection is key. We cannot manage what we're not aware of first. Now that you have a good understanding of healthy and of the checking in to healthy, let's take a look next to say, what does reacting look like? So when you're reactive, how do you know you'd be in this place? And what I teach people and what I teach my kids and what I teach the clients that I coach is reactive for me is kind of like a 7 out of 10. Right? So healthy for me is like an 8. I don't know if I've really ever been a 9 or a 10. So 8 for me feels healthy. And then once I'm in like a 7 zone or even like sliding towards the 6, this is where I'm starting to be reactive. So how do I know that? And again, this is really important because when you're working with other people or you're in relationship to other people, you want to be able to recognize quickly the signs and symptoms of someone in a reactive space. So what is it that you'd be looking for? What does reactive look like, feel like, sound like? Let's hear your ideas. Oh, Robert, I love it. You check in, yes, with your psychologist every 2 weeks. That is a great strategy for holding you accountable. So I am the same. I actually meet with someone every 3 weeks, and it is the place for me to check in with myself, to be able to reflect, to be able to debrief, to be able to get support. And that is a habit that I started probably 15 years ago, after having 2 children, right? And recognizing I definitely needed more support than what I was feeling and experiencing, especially being self-employed. So I'd love to see here, yes, reactive, irritable, great. Not really present. So having a hard time focusing or concentrating, starting to feel disconnected. Yeah, ruminating about things. Maybe you're having a hard time sleeping. Yes. Okay. So presenteeism, great. So it's like you're showing up, but you're not totally fully there, motivated and engaged. Great. Yes. There's a lot of presenteeism going on in the workplace right now. This is something leaders need to be looking for, right? Absenteeism is someone is like a 5 or lower. Can you see what presenteeism actually looks like? So not as engaged, motivation going down, sounding a bit less hopeful. Maybe you're hearing more negative comments. Maybe you're seeing more signs of stress, things like impatient, tired, irritable. I'd say reactive is another good word, right? Reactive, argumentative, defensive. So these are all the things that you want to be looking for in yourself, but also with other people. And then where do we go from there is we start to get to a place of distress. And what does distress look like? So distress is simply an increase in those symptoms. And distress would be an increase in the magnitude. Distress would be an increase in the frequency. And the other thing distress is a decrease in functioning. Now, when COVID first happened, I'm going to tell you, everyone went into this reactive space. And then the degree of a person's resilience is what helped them to be able to get back to this healthy place. So you're going to hear me talk about some protective factors like resiliency. What are the skills and the characteristics of resiliency? This is our most important protective factor when we start noticing that we're going down the road of reactivity. We need to put the brakes on and immediately start putting these protective factors in place to help us get back to a place of healthy. And the more quickly you can recognize the warning signs and the symptoms, and the more quickly you can put these protective factors in place, you will bounce back. So people can recover and bounce back from mental health issues. One of the key things is recognizing the signs and the symptoms, like you're going down a road and all of a sudden you see these signs, these are warning signs to pay attention to. If you don't and you carry on without putting in any positive coping strategies or protective factors, you will eventually end up in this place of distress. So I'd like to ask you, what does distress look like at work? So if you are recognizing yourself being distressed or your coworkers being distressed, what would be the kind of signs or symptoms that you would be looking for in the workplace? So what do you think you would see? So feeling frazzled more often or most of the time, more withdrawal, more isolation. Yes, not able to complete things, or more frequent mistakes. So I really want to make sure we are humanizing things here, that again, when challenging times happen, it is normal for people to become reactive. When you are going through difficulty, being reactive is a normal stage. You want to then recognize it to help you get back to the place of healthy. And when we don't recognize it, we then get to a place of being distressed. Our functioning goes down and the degree of the symptoms increase. So more negativity, more difficulty concentrating, challenges making decisions, ineffective problem solving, right? Missing deadlines, maybe missing meetings, and then personal things like sleep being really impacted or eating being impacted, your level of engagement really being impacted. This is absolutely the place where intervention is needed. Signs of distress at work, I've put them up here. I also want you to be paying attention to things like safety issues. We are human, so we're going to be reactive, but when we get to this place of distress, this is really where we need to step in to be giving people support. Now, here's a chance for us to do our second poll. By the time the signs of distress surface in the workplace, is it true that people are further along the mental health continuum than you realize or see? What do you think about that? By the time the symptoms show up in the workplace, people are doing worse than what you are seeing, noticing, and experiencing. Is that true or false? Let's see what the answers are. Yes, the answer is true. And why is that answer true? So again, this is why it's so important that we are noticing reactivity. And we're going to be talking about how managers and how people themselves can better address the signs of reactivity. Because by the time we see distress in the workplace, people are socialized to put their best face forward, right? So we are taught to put our smile on our face in public. I mean, just think, any of you who have children, I remember when my kids were little and they would go to school. And when they'd come home from school, I'd kind of experience and observe, in some cases, sort of the worst of how they were doing. And as a new parent, that was a bit alarming to me. And I remember going in and speaking to one of my child's teachers in kindergarten and just saying, how is this child doing? And actually the teacher said, oh, they're just lovely when they're here, they're engaged, they're positive, they're helpful, they socialize. And me thinking, that is not at all what I am seeing when they come home at the end of the day. And part of that is they are doing their best to hold it all together when they are in public. So if as a coworker or someone's supervisor or manager that you're starting to notice these signs of distress at work, please do not ignore this. These are absolute red flashing light warning signs, and it is time to step in and support where that person's at. We also want to be teaching employees that if they are recognizing those signs in themselves, and this is why, again, encouraging this habit of regular self-reflection, asking those questions in your one-to-ones with people will help to do that. I'm just going to pause for a moment here to see if there are any questions, because I know we've covered a lot of ground so far. We're about halfway through our presentation. Any questions?
There was a question from Robert earlier that we didn't quite get to, Debbie, and that was around the risk factors and if we're able to quantify those or not. That's a bit of a tough question.
Yeah, it is a hard question. And to be honest, again, it's so individual. I think the issue is for you to recognize the risk factors that you have and how they are affecting you and how they are impacting you. So, I mean, I can give, again, all kind of anecdotal examples where, I coached a client who experienced the loss of a family member and the impact that had on them, and then their ability to put in positive coping strategies and their resiliency to get back into a place of healthy functioning, took a number of months. And I've had numerous other clients who have experienced the same situation, but the impact on their functioning extremely different, right? And even putting in the same coping strategies, not having the same impact. So I really think we have to look at this on an individual basis. And that's an important distinction, because I do find with things like mental health, when we don't have a high level of awareness or understanding, we want to try and simplify things by giving these broad brush strokes, like with labels. And we want to try to understand. So we'll say things like, healthy grieving is like a 3 to 6 month process. Like, who says who? Right? So I think really what I do is when I'm coaching people, it's on an individual one-to-one basis of just what is going on for you, how is it impacting you, and how is it affecting your functioning? And what are your unique life circumstances, and what are the steps we need to take to help get you back to a higher level? So I hope that answered your question. Let's see, everyone's on the team speaking further along the continuum. So Robert, the last question, false, why? Yeah, so what I would say is by the time distress shows up in the workplace, people are further along the continuum because we are socialized to be really trying our best and putting our best foot forward when we are at work. Okay, great. I'm glad that answered your question. Okay, now this is really interesting. So every year, there's polls that are out there, and I help companies develop things like wellness strategies and put concrete plans in place to help create healthy and engaging cultures. And so part of that is we need to understand what are the things that take away from that. So when I do things like employee engagement surveys for my clients, I always ask questions around wellness, well-being, and around the things that are causing stress or in some cases distress for them. So I thought you'd find it interesting just to see over the last number of years, these are the answers that come up repeatedly with my clients and with their employees. And I've done hundreds of employee engagement surveys across Canada. So these are the most common answers. Again, this is really important from a solution-focused perspective. If we're trying as leaders to help decrease people's stress levels, then we need to have a good understanding of what the causes of their stress is in the first place, right? So again, we want to make sure that whatever solutions we're implementing are fixing the accurate causes. So what do we see here? Lack of trust in the environment is a huge cause of workplace stress. It creates a lot of uncertainty for people, which creates anxiety, which leads to burnout. A lot of times, I mean, again, I'm just surprised as an HR person, the amount of companies I work for as a consultant where employees don't even have things like accurate job descriptions, or goals aren't set on a quarterly basis for people. Like, that's actually shocking to me. So people are showing up to work every day and they don't even know what's expected of them. So one of the things we can do for people's psychological safety is help them know what the expectations are. And to me, that's kind of a simple fix, right? So it's, do you have job descriptions? Are you setting goals with people quarterly? With COVID, we saw a huge increase in things like work-life integration challenges. There's a lot of challenges people have experienced with this. And, again, employers wanting to do these broad brush strokes of one size fits all approaches that don't work, right? So there are employees who, again, I was coaching, who were in a lot of distress around May and June because they were still working from home, working out of their kitchen with 3 children running around them all day, every day, because their kids were no longer in school. And at the same time, getting emails from their manager on a weekly basis with to-do lists and expectations that were so unrealistic given this one individual's current circumstances. So again, thinking of, it's great to say people are working remotely, or in some cases we have a hybrid working model, but have you been providing people with the tools they need to actually work successfully from home? And have you been asking people what their challenges are and what the support is that they need? And each person's challenges are different. I've got other clients who were in distress because they're living alone in a 1-room apartment building and basically locked up and isolated in there for 3 months, literally feeling like they are losing their perspective on a whole bunch of things because they're so lonely and they're so bored. So this is a unique time. People's challenges, again, are individual. So rather than take these broad brush approaches to things with these policies, we need to be looking at people as individuals with individual life circumstances and helping them as much as we can with their integration challenges. And of course, as I've been talking, I realize you've read all the other bullet points, so I don't need to repeat them. But I will say that another big one that comes up is this micromanaging management style. So performance management, I feel like, is being very poorly done in a lot of organizations, where managers just do weekly check-ins with everyone, regardless of their level of ability, skill, or experience. And what that tells me is that those managers actually haven't been taught how to properly performance manage employees, because we shouldn't be performance managing an employee with a low level of ability the same way we performance manage the employee with a high level of ability. That's not effective. So anyone who's in leadership on this webinar or in HR, it's, are you providing your leaders with proper training around things like coaching and performance management? And then, yes, thank you, Pamela, poor communication. That is a huge stress factor. And you can see so many other things. And new to the list this past year is Zoom fatigue, which is a very real psychological phenomenon. I started to experience that myself because my entire business pivoted to be delivering online webinars and hours a day on Zoom. I mean, I just found my energy decreasing, my motivation decreasing, and I really had to stop what I was doing and put some boundaries in place, but also integrate better coping strategies into my day. So this is definitely an issue that a lot of my clients have asked to do lunch and learns for employees around the topic of Zoom fatigue. That's a really helpful, practical skill that we can be talking about with our employees. Okay, so now that you better understand some of the causes, what I'm going to suggest to you is if you're a leader, simply ask your employees, what are your biggest causes of stress today? And just get them to tell you, because that way you can start solutioning and actioning positive steps for change. We absolutely can't have this webinar today without talking about the role of stigma. And this is a huge concern around mental health because, as you see here, only 50% of people who become aware that they're struggling with their own mental health will take the next step of reaching out for help or support. There is self-stigma that people experience, and there is also stigma that people experience from other people in their life. I've had clients even tell me that they experience stigma from their own doctor. That is extremely disturbing to me. If someone has the courage to take the step to reach out for help and support, to then be interrogated or made to feel like there's something wrong with them is so damaging. We also see, because I've worked in HR, I can tell you that we had amazing things in our benefits and provided things like EAP, employee assistance programs, for our employees. And the sad truth is very low levels of engagement. The even more disturbing truth, as you saw earlier, with things like depression being the leading cause of long-term disability worldwide for men, is that the lowest level of engagement in things like counseling for benefits or EAP support are from men. So we've got roughly half the people getting the help and the support they need. And this is a huge conversation because it's even like there's systemic discrimination, even at like the policy levels and the financial levels within hospitals, within governments around mental health, in terms of dollars, in terms of support. So I would love to just pause for a moment here because this really is a huge issue. And I know it's a big issue in companies. I get emails all the time from my clients' employees who reach out to me because they don't even feel safe or comfortable talking to their internal HR person, or they reach out to me because they don't want to get counseling, which is the only thing their benefits or their EAP program will provide them. They feel better with the idea of getting coaching. I can tell you that before Christmas, I had 15 clients that I was working with, 13 of which were men. And every single client that I was supporting was around stress, mental health, and well-being. So men tend to feel more comfortable doing things like performance coaching. My question for all of you is, do your benefits reflect that? Do your EAP programs support that? Or are they only still supporting what are recognized as more traditional models of support like medication, psychiatry, counseling? Even within counseling in benefits, I'm shocked to know how many Canadian employers only cover psychologists. They will not cover things like registered clinical counselors. So with all of that being said, and as I mentioned, this is a huge topic to digest. How can each one of us be part of the positive change of decreasing the stigma that is very real for people around mental health? So what are some concrete ideas and suggestions that you have that you and I can just literally start doing today to be part of the change and be part of the solution? I'd love to hear your ideas. So just simply start opening up conversation with people around you. Great. Yes, setting aside time When you check in with people, it's not just, what are you working on this week? What are your goals? Tell me your to-do list. It's, how are you? And I got to be honest, even when I ask the how are you question, I get the canned answer, which is great, fine, everything's great. And then I pause. How are you really doing? Because I know that I've really been challenged over the last few weeks. So what are you hearing me say is, even being comfortable to disclose to people that you're interacting with your honesty and your vulnerability. So actually sharing with people how things have been affecting you negatively. Once you do that, it's an opening in the relationship. People no longer feel judged by you, and their defenses will come down. So you want to become a safe person who's open for people to be able to come and tell you honestly how they're doing, or for people to share with you honestly when you ask the question. You want to be developing trust in the relationships that you have with people at work. Thank you. Another great idea, making sure staff is aware of EAP. Absolutely. And I do just want to say, I've got some clients right now who have certain employee groups really struggling with mental health and addictions. And I'm just going to be honest here and say to you that when, the director of that area reached out to their HR folks for support, the answer they got back was, have you not put the posters up in the lunchroom? We need to be doing a much better job advocating for people to use EAP than simply putting posters up in lunchrooms. So I've got to tell you, after working with companies like Morneau Chappelle for 8 years, the kind of things I've heard from employees are, some have the courage to reach out and call the 1-800 number. And I don't know if anyone's done that before on this call, but when you do that, they immediately start asking you a bunch of questions. And then they go through even things like a suicide screening questionnaire. And they have a number of drop calls, because the people who call in aren't prepared for that, and they get totally overwhelmed and scared. They're like, I thought this was confidential. So when I, used to do orientation in companies when I was in HR, I made a point of walking through with employees exactly what the EAP program is, what it entails. When you phone in, this is the kind of stuff they're going to ask you. Please don't hang up. They will never disclose your name to the employer. I even show them, here's the report that we get once a month. Do you see on here, there is no one's name. All it simply says is 10 people called in. Here's the topics we're supporting people around. And the purpose of why HR gets that information is so that they can then develop programs to better support the issues employees are experiencing. There's a ton of mistrust, and it's real. And how I know that, again, is from the employee engagement surveys that I do for my clients. Even clients who have EAP, people do not trust it to phone in. So we need to be doing a much better job of helping people understand that support that is there. Okay, anything else to decrease stigma? I absolutely agree. Belle, Let's Talk Day is coming up. That's awesome. Have you got a plan for that week? Have you got a strategy in place? What are things you're going to do? Are you doing lunch and learns? Are you doing webinars? Have you planned, like, I love what Victoria is saying around first aid kits. That is so great for people who are working remotely right now. And let's not just make mental health a conversation that we're having with people once a year. This should be coming up regularly. It's called psychological safety, right? We've got safety meetings that happen weekly in organizations. Can we get the safety committee? And can we even include stuff around mental health and well-being as part of our regular safety talks? This to me would be a great starting point for a lot of people. Yes, psychological health and safety. Awesome. Okay, thank you. I do notice the time and I want to carry on here. So I'm just going to hit the ground running. As you can see here, when we look at what are protective factors around mental health and well-being, there are a lot of protective factors. You see at the top is education and understanding. And so again, I just want to say, if your leader team has not had training for them around understanding and supporting mental health, that is absolutely a critical first step for you. If your employee group has not had any training on this, that is absolutely a critical first step. And then beyond that, if you're building out your competency set or your training schedule for the year, I often get emails from HR folks who are like, Debbie, what are the hot topics for 2021 or for 2020? And because I've worked with a number of, very reputable leadership development companies, I can tell you these are the hot topics. So if you haven't heard of, or if you are not providing training on the topics that are up here, these are the topics you want to be getting training on this year. So positive intelligence, if you've never heard of it, again, you're a bit behind the 8 ball. Positive intelligence is what is termed as the new emotional intelligence. I just did a 6-week training course on the topic of positive intelligence, and I'm doing some great webinars for my clients around this topic. And then, of course, emotional intelligence, which has been around for decades, is another really important training topic. You see here resiliency. So these are all those protective factors. These are the muscles and the skills that we want to be developing in not just our leaders, but in our employees in general. These are the things that are going to help people to be able to thrive during times of challenge, change, loss, failure, and disappointment. So we really need to be building up these skill sets in order to help people be able to cope and function better with what's going on. I want to end off our time together today by just mentioning a couple of things around how you can support someone if you recognize that they're struggling. So you've already heard me say today, early intervention is key. Empathy and understanding instead of judgment or criticism. Coaching around resiliency, muscles, and skills. And I will say to you, if we go back here, I just have one bullet that says resiliency. I'll be doing a training session actually through Wellness Works in April. So you might want to look out for that, all on the topic of how do you coach for resiliency? Because resiliency itself has 6 to 8 muscles attached to it. So resiliency is an umbrella term. And there are 6 to 8 skills that help a person be resilient. Do you have those skills? Have you had training? Do your employees have training on those skills? Because those are, again, the muscles that we need to develop. Sorry. So just going back here, taking a supportive approach, an encouraging approach always is more effective. I really want to also suggest that we are finding out exactly how people are doing and helping them prioritize. What I've seen is most of the people that I coach who are overwhelmed and stressed out live in the land of urgent. So when I teach workshops on things like time management and prioritization, the folks I'm coaching really lack those skills. It makes sense to me then that they'd be feeling stressed and overwhelmed. So sometimes, right, when I'm doing kind of an assessment of why someone's feeling so stressed and overwhelmed, I'll uncover it's because they lack the ability to prioritize. So by giving them tools like the priority matrix, and by getting them to talk to their managers around what their priorities are, getting some clarity around that, it dramatically can decrease their workload. I'm also going to suggest that when things are challenging, we got to take things into bite-sized pieces. So instead of setting monthly goals or quarterly goals, we chunk it down and we set weekly goals with people in our one-to-ones, but then we also get them to come up with daily goals. So when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, like minimizing, shrinking things into bite-sized chunks, that's part of smart goal setting. That gives people a feeling of accomplishment. You know, if I can check off 3 things on my list today, that increases dopamine in my brain, which is the feel-good hormone, and that fuels my motivation. And then I feel more confident and I feel better about myself. So I'm more likely to show up tomorrow optimistic and hopeful. But if I've got a list of 10 things to do in my day and I have very little controllable time, by the end of my day, when I've only gotten 3 things done, I'm going to feel terrible about myself. So really helping people to chunk things down, prioritize, and set smart goals is absolutely critical. I do want to just take a moment to talk about this dirty word here of performance improvement plans. And I see that we're almost out of time. I mentioned earlier that we need to do a better job in organizations of teaching managers how to do performance management. And I'm just going to say performance improvement plans is a great example of this. In most places that I coach and work with, performance improvement plans are a dirty word. The minute you say to someone, I'm putting you on a performance improvement plan, their reaction is, this is the step to try and get me out the door. This is like constructive dismissal. So managers have really misused this tool, and we have not actually implemented it in a healthy, positive way. So when I'm working in organizations, when I'm doing training for employees and managers on performance management, I actually talk about how performance improvement plans are positive. And the reason we have them is to help you know exactly where you're at and how you're doing, and also to uncover the gaps, and to also have shared accountability between managers and employees to get you back on track, to help you be successful by putting plans in place for your improvement. So if managers start to use this tool properly and early, like even when the reactive stage is noticeable, you can course correct very quickly. My experience in my consulting is managers don't do that, and it gets way too far down a road, and then they want to put in a performance improvement plan. And that is absolutely misusing the tool. So that's all I'm going to say on that. We could do a whole workshop on how to manage performance and implement it more effectively. So just in wrapping up today, I've got a couple slides here. Sharing your concerns. I think always it's about being respectful, non-judgmental, asking people how you can support them, being encouraging. I would involve HR right away because you are out of your depth. I say to managers, your job is not to be someone's psychiatrist or psychologist. So I really want to make sure that's clear from today. Your job is not to diagnose someone. Your job is to notice when someone is struggling and to then step in and offer support and guidance and encouragement. Your job is to step in and facilitate that person getting the help and the support that they need. So I really want to make sure that that is clear. Okay, what not to do? Give advice, make personal comments about people, diagnose, force them to open up or get help, or get frustrated. When you've got a trusting and respectful relationship with someone, they are more likely to listen to your advice, and they are more likely to partner with you in taking steps to improvement. So I can't underemphasize the need for leaders to develop trusting and respectful relationships with people. So I know that we're out of time. And as I said, we were hitting this at a high level and a lot to cover today. I do want to end off just by asking you a question, if you don't mind, with what are some concrete action steps of things that you could do as a manager or as a company, if you're sitting in the HR seat, to help improve employees' mental health and well-being? And I want you to think back, right, to what some of the causes of workplace stress are, and also to what some of the risk factors are to a person's mental health. What are the things that you can positively influence? What are the things that you can positively influence? So I'd love to hear your ideas and your suggestions of what are the action steps that you're going to take away from this session today. So if you could just take a moment, because I think your thoughts and ideas will encourage and inspire other people on the webinar. Thank you, Lori. Number one, training. And can I say, Lori, here's the thing. Managing people is a partnership. So this implies 50-50 accountability. I say this around performance management. I will not do training in a company just for leaders on performance management. I also do training for employees because we are saying it's a partnership. So we can't just give 50% of the relationship, the tools and the skills if we want it to be successful. We need to be giving both groups the same skills, the same information, the same tools, so that the partnership can work more effectively together. Let's hear some other thoughts and ideas. So thank you. I see here, looking at your EAP program, I want to encourage you to make sure it includes coaching. So I do a ton of coaching with Morneau Chappelle around mental health. And that is something that can be provided. So it's worth looking into. Recognizing that traditional, more medical-based approaches aren't the only things that help people. So things like meditation, encouraging that, yoga, encouraging that, nutrition, financial support and advice for people. Yes, encourage EAP. Absolutely. But can we really help walk people through it and help to break down the stigma around it? So I'm doing a number of employee sessions for one of my clients that are all male employee groups. And this isn't just a like, hi, here's the EAP program, there's the poster. Like I'm going to actually be sitting down over Zoom with these groups and really talking to them about what the EAP is, how it can benefit you, why aren't people accessing it, and answer questions like in a Q&A format so that people can feel more comfortable with it. So lots of ideas up here. And as you see, lastly, just some thoughts on creating healthier workplaces. Can we also be showing people the tools and the resources that are available outside of the company? This isn't just all on companies. Communities have great resources. Wellness Works has great resources. The Canadian Mental Health Association has great resources. There are local branches in every community. So if you cannot, as an employer, provide things like counseling in your benefits, you can provide people access to the services, supports, and resources outside that are available to you. I'll just pause here. I know we've talked about a lot today. I just really want to thank you for your time. And I want to thank you for all your awesome participation and your comments and your questions. Does anyone have a burning question that they just didn't get a chance to get answered throughout our time together today? I would hate for you to leave the webinar and not have your question answered. So I'm just going to pause here. Thank you, Robert. The national standard, great. Yes. So even putting policies in place around psychological safety, really making sure we are building organizations of trust with employees. Kendall, I'm going to tell you my bias, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a trainer. Absolutely, education is the game changer. People cannot better manage what they don't know and don't understand. And in my 25 years of HR, I'm just telling you from my experience, the folks I've had the privilege of walking beside and supporting, a lot of the times are struggling because they don't really understand what's going on, or they lack self-awareness, or they have self-awareness, but they don't know what to do about it. So I think some baseline education around all of this is really critical for adults. They've started doing it in all the school systems in BC. I'm so encouraged by that, right? Kids today know more on this topic than the adults who are in your work environment. So it's a lack of understanding and education. I'd say, Victoria, would you agree with me on that? Like, that is really, I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
my passion. That's my purpose. I do free webinars all the time on this topic. I just want to get the information out there.
Yeah, it makes such a big difference just to have that education. And it's so promising to see it taught in curriculums, even in some business curriculums now in university, we're starting to see some of the education included. So that's great, but we need more of that for sure.
Yes. So I'm going to say training, training, and more training. And if you're wondering what training, it's back to the list of protective factors: understanding and supporting mental health, positive intelligence, emotional intelligence, resiliency, stress management. Those are the big five. So even if you can take one step after today, if you have the budget for one session, I mean, I also said to Victoria, I've been busier the last 6 months than ever, because it is easier now to do training than ever before. Webinars, right? Over Zoom, way easier, more cost effective too. That's the benefit. I can have 50 people on a webinar. I used to go in person and it would be the same cost and you'd have 20 people in the room. So I think training today, that's a huge benefit of COVID, is training has become easier, more accessible, and more affordable. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, Victoria? Any last minute thoughts for the group?
I don't see too many more questions. There was one question just here around what is the next step that from Robert as well. But I think you were pretty clear on that one with the response there already. So
Training.
yeah, a lot of thank yous coming in. They loved it and they're asking for more.
Great. Well, and I'm
Great.
encouraging people to come back in April, right? We're going to do
Exactly.
some stuff on resiliency. And again, it's an hour, so it's going to be like a quick, and I just encourage you to look further into at more depth some of the things that we've looked at today. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Victoria, thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Debbie, for being here today. That was really, really great. I can see from all the comments that that everybody loved it and have some really, everybody has practical tips that they can take and go back with. So we'll send a follow-up email after today just with information on how you can contact Debbie if you'd like to contact her, and just some more information about some of the other resources and things that we mentioned. So thank you everybody for participating today in today's webinar. And I took away great tips as well. And so thank you so much, Debbie. That was really, really fabulous.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.